Welcome back to another FPL video. This will be the best wildcard team for Double Gameweek 28, and I'll talk about some alternatives just in case you don't want to load up on too many Bournemouth or Luton Town players. But this wildcard squad will help you optimize Double Gameweek 28, have a solid team for Blank Gameweek 29 without needing the free hit, and a solid platform from Gameweek 30 until the end of the season with enough funds in the bank to easily buy back Salah and Erling Haaland. Smash the like button and subscribe if you're new. Our aim is to get this video to the 200 likes. I'm going to keep on pushing towards 23k subscribers and beyond. Join me on Twitter and Instagram. Follow me on those platforms for all the latest FPL and UCL fantasy updates. Join the Discord server to be part of a great community and join the FPL League. There's also a link to Drafthound in the description below. Be sure to check all of that out. Without further ado, let's jump straight into this video. I've gone for Neto once again. He's the 5th highest scoring goalkeeper in terms of FPL points with 90 overall, and I recommended him in the trans tips video as a buy. So if you are looking for any goalkeeper to purchase in Gameweek 28, I think Neto is the best one. He's got solid fixtures until Gameweek 32. He does blank in 29, but that's where the second goalkeeper comes in, and I think these two could rotate quite nicely until the end of the season. They're also quite cheap. Neto coming in at 4.6 million, and for me, he's by far the best option to cover that Bournemouth defence, especially with Senesi set to miss out 4 to 5 weeks due to injury, according to a very reliable Argentinian journalist called Gaston Edul. But the second goalkeeper I'm going for is Areola, who got a 13-pointer in Gameweek 27. He was in my starting 11 for the whole week, but you'll find out what happened in my team selection video coming very shortly. But I think these two goalkeepers offer tremendous value, and I don't think there are many particular standouts in this position. In the past, we've had Nick Pope, Emi Martinez, and countless others, but this season I think Areola is probably the best, but a lot of his returns have come in specific games, probably 5 or 6 overall, where he went absolutely crazy with some double-digit returns. But in general, there hasn't been any consistent option, and I think Neto and Areola are just about good enough to make it into your wildcard squad and be good options until the end of the season. The same can be said about defenders. There haven't been many standouts. Trippier had a brief spell earlier in the season. You also had Trent around December. But compared to previous campaigns where we've had Trent, Trippier, Robertson, and a few other premiums who've done really well, this season does pale in comparison when it comes to defender options in FPL. But I think the best options do come from that Arsenal defence, who've had the best record in 2024 in terms of wins, goals scored, goals conceded, clean sheets. The underlying numbers are absolutely ridiculous, and the goals that Gabriel and Arsenal defenders are conceding are down to maybe some marginal errors from themselves. And in the case of the game against Liverpool, it was an own goal by Gabriel, and that mainly came from a miscommunication between Saliba and David Raya. But really, it seems like Arsenal only concede when they score it themselves, and they're basically shooting themselves in the foot. Their defensive numbers are absolutely ridiculous, and it's Brentford up next. Arsenal kept 2 clean sheets against them already in the Carabao Cup, a 1-0 victory, and also away from home in the Premier League. And to be fair, both games were at the same stadium, and now it's time to face them at the Emirates. Let's see what they can do. There is a blank in Gameweek 29 for Arsenal. They do face Man City in Gameweek 30, but from Gameweek 31 until the end of the season, I think it's worth doubling up on that Arsenal defence, but I wouldn't do it just yet because the blank in 29 is already a put-off, and Gameweek 30, it could be a bit awkward if you have that double up at this moment in time. So Gabriel does come in here, and I'm going for a few double Gameweek defenders, which might seem a bit counterproductive because they come from defences that aren't particularly reliable, but I would go for Zabani or Kerkez. It's between those two, with Senesi set to miss out 4 to 5 weeks, and I think Zabani is just a safer pick. And with Kerkez, you have slightly more attacking potential, but I compared their stats in recent streams, and their numbers are absolutely awful in terms of XG, expected assists, chances created, big chances, anything you could name, even the shots. They both have 6, 7. It's really ridiculous. They're not offering that much attacking potential. In the case of Senesi even, who had 3 goals and 2 assists, he only had 7 shots, and I covered him a long time ago. I said these numbers aren't sustainable, but I did like him for Double Gameweek 28. Those that went for the Argentine are very unlucky, to say the least. I think he was the best Bournemouth defender, period. And now it's between Zabani or Kerkez. I mentioned Kerkez as being my slight preference in a recent stream, but honestly, it's down to those two as one of my transfers in Double Gameweek 28, and I still haven't fully committed or lock that transfer in yet because I don't trust either of them, especially in the long term. But really what you get from a Bournemouth defender is a double in Game Week 28, a good chance of a clean sheet against Sheffield United at home, and also a decent fixture in Game Week 30 against Everton when Arsenal and Man City play each other. So Bournemouth defenders can be quite useful from that perspective, and they have good fixtures until Game Week 32. But a double up in the Bournemouth defence doesn't sit right with me in the long term. Now the third defender is someone with a lot of attacking potential, but he has been playing as a left centre back due to all the injuries that are going on in his club, and I'm talking about Doughty. Luton Town currently have 10 players unavailable due to injury, but Doughty still has attacking potential from set pieces. In terms of Premier League players, he's probably one of the very best in terms of set piece threat. His crosses are very promising. They also have a lot of quality in them. And I think Doughty's the only Luton Town defender or defensive coverage I would consider. Even Kaminsky in goal, who isn't too bad, I wouldn't go for him. Doughty's the only one, and he helps you cover Game Week 29 without the use of a free hit with a home fixture against Nottingham Forest. Afterwards, though, all Luton Town assets are arguably sells as they face Tottenham and Arsenal away back-to-back in Game Weeks 30 and 31. That leaves 2 spots left for the defenders, and I have to say, compared to previous wildcard teams earlier this season, this defensive line will look the weakest, but it's also thinking about double Game Week 28, blank Game Week 29, and also having a long-term structure in place. But I would go for a Spurs defender in a doggy, maybe Pedro Porro if he's available, but I would go for a doggy at this moment in time. I don't trust Spurs defensively, but what I like most about them is the good fixture in Game Week 29 against Fulham, although there could be a surprise in that London derby, and also in Game Week 30 at home versus Luton Town. That's where a doggy and also all Spurs defenders could be quite useful. I wouldn't go for Christian Romero for the reasons I discussed in the transfer tips, but I think a doggy is the best way to cover that Tottenham defence overall. But having said that, I don't trust them defensively, and it's pretty much a short to medium term punt. The last defender is another one who's really in here because of Game Week 29 having a very plum fixture against Burnley away, and that's going to be Reguilon. But I have to say, I do like his attacking potential from open play and set pieces, and he always looks quite promising on the eye, and he can get a goal or assist, especially in terms of creativity. I think that's where the Spaniard is quite decent for his price. But Brentford are in a terrible run of form. They're not getting many victories. They're in a relegation battle, and they need to get results ASAP. But what I like about Brentford is their fixtures from Game Week 32 until the end of the season, and that's where Tony and Reguilon could be very useful. And you also have Flecken in goal, who's a decent choice, but I think Reguilon is the best way to cover that Brentford defence, period, until the end of the season. Despite coming off at half-time against Sheffield United, Saka is absolutely fine. He had an illness. He was good enough to start the game, and because Arsenal had the game won by that stage, Saka was taken off. I think it was a good move by Arteta, and of course, those that didn't captain Saka were quite thankful in the end. But I think Saka is a great option, a season keeper. The only issues are Game Week 29 with a blank and Game Week 30 against Man City away. But in every other game week, 28, 31, all the way until Game Week 38, I think Saka is arguably one of the best midfielders in FPL. And if you can find a way to have Saka, Son, Salah, and then Haaland up front, I think you're pretty much set for the rest of the campaign. But of course, you have to fill it with some good players in the rest of your team, whether it's the wildcard or your normal squads, and that's what this wildcard team video will help you achieve. But Saka for me is by far the best Arsenal option, especially in the attacking areas. Despite Havertz also looking quite good in recent games from an attacking perspective, also Odegaard is running the show every single game. If you were to double up on the Arsenal attack, it would be Saka and Odegaard, then it'd be Martinelli, and I think Havertz would be last. Now, next up in this midfield is going to be a player that I talked about selling several weeks ago. It was the right call at the time. He was still blanking, but he has been picking it up after that hat-trick against Brentford. He got an assist against Everton, and of course I'm talking about Jarrod Bowen, who faces Burnley at home and then faces Aston Villa in blank Game Week 29. Then it's Newcastle away in Game Week 30, which is quite decent actually. But I think with this wildcard structure, the plan would be Bowen to Salah in Game Week 30, and even if Bowen does well against Newcastle, it's a move that will pay off in the long term, and Salah for me is arguably the best captaincy option in Game Week 30 and 31. But I'll discuss that later on using FPL.team. For the interim, I think Jarrod Bowen is the best West Ham option by far. Him and Areola are the only ones I'd consider. I think Kudus, if you were to triple up, would be the only one I'd consider. I definitely wouldn't double up on that West Ham defence. But let's complete this midfield. There are 3 remaining slots, and I'm going to go for a double up in the Spurs midfield, and you know who I'm going to go for. Heung-min Son for me is a great option, and he's actually done very well whenever I've had him in my team, and he's someone that could be a season keeper as well. Just bear in mind that Spurs' fixtures do turn for the worst around Gameweek 34, but they could have a double in either Gameweek 34 or 37, and potentially another one in Gameweek 36, which would include Chelsea, and those two teams would double, and that's where Spurs assets could be very useful. So Son could be a season keeper, but one move you could consider, especially if you're struggling for funds, to buy back Erling Haaland around Gameweek 31 or 32, is to downgrade Son to Phil Foden. And that's right, I'm not going for Foden in this wildcard team. It is risky. I think Foden is another one that does form part of the best midfield, and ideally you'd have Son, Foden, Saka and Salah all at the same time alongside Cole Palmer. And speaking of which, that's another player I'm going to go for in the heart of that midfield. And yes, you can go for Barkley as a 2-game-week punt. He's got a double this week. Then he also features in 29 against Nottingham Forest. So if you are happy with tripling up on Luton Town, I would go for Barkley instead of Palmer. But I just think in the long term, Palmer's someone you want to have as soon as Gameweek 30. He's got 2 doubles along the way, and he's just a season keeper, fixture proof on penalties. He's by far the best budget midfielder. Anthony Gordon's the only one who runs him a bit close, maybe Douglas Luiz as well, and with the form he's in, Leon Bailey is another one, but I think Palmer stands alone as the best option overall. But only one midfielder slot left, and I did mention it, a double up in that Spurs midfield, and that's going to be James Maddison. Now, Richarlison seemed very positive about being available for Blank Gameweek 29 against Fulham, so let's keep an eye out for that. But I still think I'd go for Maddison and Son. My only concern with Maddison is his injury record. He picks up 2 or 3 injuries every single season, and he does miss a lot of games, but he's a short-term punt. He's got a good fixture. I'd argue even this week against Aston Villa, I think it could be a high-scoring game and arguably the best game to watch this weekend, although Liverpool and Man City might have something to say about that. Gameweek 30 against Luton Town, having a trip up in Spurs, especially 2 attackers, could be golden for your FPL teams. And in Gameweek 29, it is Fulham away. Maddison has a good record against them. He did very well in the reverse fixture this season. So this midfield 5, of course, a bit different to what I usually talk about. There's no Man City midfielder. There's no Mohamed Salah, but they will come in for this wildcard squad with transfers that are booked in the next couple of weeks. So just wait until Gameweek 30 and beyond to then consider these options once again. But I think these 5 midfielders are going to do a great job, not only until the end of the season, but particularly in the case of those they're looking to offload very soon to buy back the likes of Salah. They can do a great job for the next 2 game weeks and really rise you up the ranks and get you to where you want to be with those green arrows. I said in a recent stream that Ollie Watkins is a season keeper, and in isolation he is. The problem that we're going to have very soon is that Aston Villa are going to enter a torrid fixture run, and if you want to go for Erling Haaland and all the midfielders I discussed, you have to make sacrifices, and Watkins might have to be one of them. But don't go without Watkins yet. That would be a fatal mistake in my opinion. I've also suffered a lot in terms of my FPL rank whenever I've sold Watkins, and I've learnt my lesson, and it's going to be very difficult to part ways. I might still keep him, but we'll get to that when the time comes. Watkins in the interim is a great option, even against Tottenham at home, which looks like a difficult game. Watkins can do really well there, and the way Tottenham are defending, I think Aston Villa could score 2 or 3 goals very easily. In Gameweek 29, Watkins is a captaincy option, and whether you're free hitting or not in Gameweek 29, I think there are 3 players that are arguably essential for that blank. Heung-min Son, Watkins, and I'd argue Tony, purely for the fixture, but I think Son and Watkins are by far the best options, and as a result they're the best captaincy options. I would ensure you have Son and Watkins for Blank Gameweek 29, no matter what your chip strategy is, whether you're saving the free hit or using it, and Watkins is essential until Gameweek 30. After that point, from Gameweek 31 until the end of the season, you could argue that Watkins is a sell, but I don't think it's that clear cut. It just comes down to your personal preference and what your priorities are. Do you want to fund a midfield 5 of Palmer, Foden, Saka, Son, Salah, etc. in the long term? If that's the case, that's fair enough. I think that does justify selling Ollie Watkins. But in terms of alternatives in the forward line, Højlund could be a good option until the end of the season. He could have a double of Newcastle at home and Sheffield United at home in Gameweek 34. That's a potential double there for Manchester United. You've also got Alvarez, who's been a good and decent option throughout most of the season. Erling Haaland goes without saying. And you've got a few others. Cunha, if he comes back from injury very soon. Dominic Solanke and Ivan Toney. But Watkins, for me, is the best forward in FPL. And it's going to be very difficult to part ways with him from Gameweek 31 and to whatever point you really sell him. That's completely down to your team and your situation. But we've got 2 forward spots left. I'm going for the 5th highest scoring midfielder in terms of FPL points, and that's Carlton Morris, who I talked about in the transfer tips. I ranked the 4 best options to buy for Double Gameweek 28, the doublers, so to speak. So in first, I went for Solanke, and Carlton Morris was second, even above Neto and Doughty, as a great Double Gameweek 28 option. And what I like about him as well is that he features in Gameweek 29 against Nottingham Forest at home, and if Adebayo is out, Morris will play down the middle and he's on penalties. So there's a lot to like with Carlton Morris. Even as an inside forward and playing off Adebayo, Carlton Morris has done quite well this season, so he's a really good option for his price. 5.1 million with over 100 FPL points and some decent underlying numbers. His XG is over 8, I believe. He's had 12 big chances. Now, they're not anything groundbreaking, these stats, but remember, he's a 5.1 million forward for a newly promoted club, and he's on penalties. So I think Carlton Morris for the next 2 game weeks is arguably the best or the second best forward in FPL. Now, the final forward slot is going to go to none other than Dominic Solanke, the best captaincy option in Double Gameweek 28, and you can book in a transfer in Blank Gameweek 29 of Solanke to Tony, as I'll show you very soon, using FPL.team. I'm not a big fan of booking in transfers on the wildcard, but based on the timing, if you're using it right now in Double Gameweek 28, I see no alternative, and this is the optimal front three for Double Gameweek 28, and you just sell Solanke to Tony in Gameweek 29, and that's how you cover the double this week and the blank in 29. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. I'm now going to show you what Drafthound are suggesting for the wildcard and see if that could maybe spark some changes to my final wildcard squad, where I'll use FPL.team later on to visualize this squad in Gameweek 28, 29 and Gameweek 30. So Drafthound have recommended some quite interesting choices here. So they've gone for Neto, but Kelleher is the backup goalkeeper, with Alisson set to miss out for the next month, potentially 2 months. He's going to be out until April at the earliest. They've also gone for Zabani over Kirkes, but FPL.team do favour Kirkes in terms of expected points, so do bear that in mind. I don't think there's much to separate them. I put a poll out on my channel between Zabani and Kirkes, and Zabani is winning by a landslide at this moment in time. It's also recommended Gabriel, but they've gone for Dunk, and the other 2 defenders are Bradley and Branthwaite. I really like that Branthwaite pick, by the way. I did actually talk about him for a potential Gameweek 31 wildcard during my chip strategy guide, but that was obviously a very rough draft, but I think Branthwaite could be a decent option. The midfield 4 includes Saka and Kai Havertz, who's been in incredible form, to be fair. He's been playing well for the last couple of months, but in terms of goals and assists, he's really come to another level in recent Premier League games, but I still wouldn't recommend Havertz on the wildcard, to be honest. They have gone for Son. I think that's a great suggestion, and Phil Foden. I think that's another good one from Drafthound, and the front 3 is also as good as you can get. Erling Haaland, of course, can't be ignored, but Morris and Watkins, for me, those are the ones I have in my wildcard squad, and I don't think it makes much sense to go about Solanke this week. I know booking in transfers isn't ideal, but I'd much rather have Solanke in Gameweek 28 compared to Haaland, and you can always buy Haaland back in Gameweek 30, 31 or 32. But there's some great suggestions from Drafthound. They've also got Luis Diaz there in the bench, and he's been in good form in the last month or so. And overall, I think most of the foundations are quite similar to what I've built. There's a few key differences and surprises in there, like Dunk, Havertz, Diaz arguably, Bradley, and you could argue no Solanke is a huge surprise, but that's what Drafthound are recommending, and they're expecting an increase of over 10 expected points. So that looks pretty good, to be honest. I do like the look of it, but I think some of those options, not going for Solanke, doesn't sit right with me. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Be sure to sign up to Drafthound using my link, and as a pro pay team member, you gain access to all of the tools. On the right hand side, you can see my own team without making any transfers, and there are so many things that it can do really easily on Drafthound. So you click this optimization tool and it will sort out your bench and the captaincy just like that at the click of a button, and you've got so much more there, such as player scouting to identify the ultimate differentials, which I've shown you in recent videos and streams. Let's now head over to FPL.team and talk about how my wildcard squad will set up. The more I look at this wildcard team, the more tempted I am to play the chip this week. I think it could be a bit too early for me, but it's a distinct possibility. There is a slim chance, but as things stand, it looks like I'm going to take hits and either use the free hit in Gameweek 29 or just take even more hits to navigate that blank without the need of that free hit chip. I'll cover that in my team selection video. But for this wildcard squad, Neto is in goal. I know Areola could do well against Burnley at home, but Neto has Sheffield United at home, and I think that's enough to make him the best goalkeeper in Double Gameweek 28. Not to mention another home game against Luton Town, where I do expect Bournemouth to concede, but having said that, I think Neto should do quite well, and it wouldn't surprise me if he got 8 points or even more. The back three will be Gabriel, Zabini and Doughty. The midfield four is Saka, Bowen, Palmer and Son. And that front three looks really good this week. Solanke, Morris and Watkins. The bench would include Areola, Maddison, Udogie and Region, and the expected points is 83.1, and if we actually replace Zabini with Kirkes, that figure would rise even higher to around 84 expected points. If we then go to Blank Gameweek 29, Areola would start. We've got a back three of Region, Udogie and Doughty, and also three midfielders in Bowen, Maddison and Son, and a front three of Tony, Morris and Watkins. So Tony would come in for Solanke, a booked-in transfer, and as I mentioned earlier, you could go for Barkley instead of Palmer, so you get 2 extra fixtures over the Chelsea star. And the reason why I've gone for Palmer myself is because I think he's a far superior option to Barkley. It wouldn't surprise me if Palmer outscored him in Gameweek 28. And from Gameweek 30 and beyond, Chelsea have good fixtures. They've got a few doubles on the horizon, and Palmer is one of the best midfielders in the game. So it's up to you. Let me know if you're going to go for Barkley or Palmer. But overall, even with 10, I think that's absolutely fine to go with on the wild card, and we've got 9 million in the bank, which makes it very simple to buy back Salah. I'd probably sell Bowen for Salah. I wouldn't want to get rid of Palmer, Maddison, Son or Saka based on fixtures, or in the case of Saka, in the long term he's a season keeper. And the Spurs midfielders are very good for the next 3 game weeks, so Gameweek 28, 29 and 30, but they are dispensable from Gameweek 31 and beyond. And if you need the funds, I think Son to Foden makes a lot of sense, and also Maddison to Anthony Gordon, as Newcastle have great fixtures until Gameweek 35. So in Gameweek 30, we'd have Neto in goal, at home to Everton. A defensive double up for Bournemouth in a single game week doesn't look great, and Everton actually do create a lot of chances. They just have poor finishes in front of goal. But we've got Region, Udogie and Zabini as the back three, a midfield 5 of Salah, Palmer, Maddison, Son and Saka, and a front 2 of Tony and Watkins. And the bench looks decent, but of course Luton Town do play Tottenham, and I would favour Tottenham Hotspur in that matchup. I've got Gabriel last on the bench because it is Man City. If it was any other game except maybe Liverpool away, I think Gabriel would start, or at least be higher in the bench rankings, and Areola of course is away to Newcastle as well. Then in Gameweek 31 you could do something like Gordon in for Maddison and Haaland coming in as well, but the problem is, in my case, I'm 0.1 million short, so instead of selling Maddison, you might need to sell Son, for example, or you could do both transfers, Son to Foden and Maddison to Anthony Gordon, and you can buy back Erling Haaland and also have Saka, Salah and a very strong midfield 5. But I think the ideal scenario would be to keep Heung-min Son and also have all the other options I just mentioned in the midfield. I think the defence as well could also do with some improvement in the long term, and with your transfers and maybe the occasional hit, that's where you could bolster that defence as we get along. Of course, there are a lot of fixture swings to take into account. That's why wildcarding this week could be a bit awkward, because there's a lot to take into account and we don't have the full picture in terms of Gameweek 34 and 37. We'll know a lot more by the time we get to Gameweek 30, so there's still some time left, of course, until we understand a lot more about the remainder of this FPL season. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, and thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, then be sure to smash the like button and subscribe for new. Let's get this video to the 200 likes, and let's keep on pushing towards 23k subscribers and beyond. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, for all the latest FPL and UCL fantasy updates. Join me on Discord for a great community and to be up to date with everything you need to know for FPL and UCL fantasy. Become a channel member or patron for early access to my videos, and also for a lot of other perks such as priority reply to comments during live streams and videos and much more. There's a link to Drafthound in the description below, and also to the FPL League where there are thousands of members. So let's see if you can finish top of the DylanRCM League. I wish you all the best of luck for Double Gameweek 28 and the rest of the season, and I'll see you next time.